Welcome back, everyone. Please take your seats. We will continue with our final session, 2 sessions. And we now move to a session which, at least the first session will broaden the perspective beyond auditing to the broader future of work in an AI-driven world. So we're very pleased to have Saskia Nijs with us. Saskia is an expert at the intersection of people, technology, and the future of work, with over 25 years of experience at organizations such as Microsoft, Philips, and KLM. And she's the founder of Human Workforce, where she helps organizations combine technology and human potential to create sustainable value. And today, Saskia will share her insights with us about this interaction between humans, AI, and the organizational context, which I think links really nicely with the other presentations we've seen, and what that means for skills, collaboration, and professional roles going forward. Saskia, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I think for you it's already has been some long days. I'm here as a practitioner. So all the work that I do, the research that I do is mainly in the practice where I work. For example, at this moment, we do a lot of research on AI and work happiness with Team Rockstars IT, which is a company where I'm a board advisor. So what I tell you today is about what I see, what I've experienced, and what I've done. Indeed, from all the years of experience working with and in technology companies. And my personal mission, being educated in this field of technology and technology in the workspace, is that the first question that we raise when implementing technology is what are the human skills, tasks, value that we definitely want to keep. And I think in most of the technology companies, or when technology is being introduced, it starts with the question, where can we put technology? And we forget about all the other technologies, other parts of the process. So my first question for everything that you will be doing and implementing is, what do we really, really, really want to keep? So that's also where my presentation is about today, and why I do presentations. I also teach at Nijrode, mainly to HR professionals, because I think this field of AI really needs to step up from our HR departments, and usually they're on the back seat. I think we're in a new phase where, again, a technology is telling us that it will give us much more time and space. If you put all the newspapers, in the time when I started to work was when the internet started to come into the workplace, the same headlines, the same research, the same productivity gains, etc., were with the internet as we have right now. So we're reliving it, or at least I'm reliving it. That's how old I'm starting to get, but I'm reliving it. So time and space is what is the promise. And I would love that this time we can manage to get that dream actually come true. Because I think in most of the world, instead of working less, we started to work more, especially if you look at a household, where usually a family worked an average of 40 hours, and now it's 68 in total. So we started to work harder. And actually what we see already now with AI, the first question when people say, oh, I'm so productive with AI, I ask them, what do you do with the time you save? And then I get like, I don't know. And actually, if you start to measure, like, yes, it feels more productive, but I measure a lot of hours that people are busy and redoing or learning, etc. So actually, at this moment, I don't think we save a lot of time. And for company, it's not about saving time, it's about productivity. So I don't think we should let it happen and just say, okay, well, we'll see what AI will bring us. No, what do we want and where do we want to make sure that AI can support us? I think letting it happen, one of the biggest dramas actually of this time is social media, which was a technology which was cool and we could share, etc. All the side effects that we currently have, we didn't know, but did we really debate the fact that we were using that technology? And I think we didn't. And we see now that it affects actually democracies, health, interconnection, silos in societies. So I'm looking mainly in the workforce, but if you look in the societal part of what's happening with technology, I think we all need to step up and think. So I hope you will all be with me in that journey in the next couple of years. So that's why I created the Humane Workforce, working with companies to identify what they don't want to lose. And I do that on 3 angles. So I look at the meaningful work. That's the theoretical part that I do with the VU, the university here in Amsterdam, in the meaningful work research. But from that meaningful work, look at what does it impact the engagement of our people and how does collaborative AI, so working together, can support us. Because technology and work has been changing. Of course, when we look back at when we started to create cars, we went to work instead of having our work around our house. So we started to get working in shifts, which we still have, the 9 to 5. And when the computer came in the workplace, we all became knowledge workers, or knowledge work became a real economic driver of societies. And when I joined the workplace, the internet started. And the internet was created, especially also within universities. I was at that time an intern at Apple Computers, and it was to communicate broadly across organizations, across countries, collaborate, share knowledge, create knowledge together. 95% of email traffic is internal. So, and it actually became a tool that makes us create tasks or deliver tasks. Say, can you do this for me? Can you do that for me? And then we get an email and say, well, set up a meeting to discuss what we actually want. So email has never been created as a tool to divide work or to create work. And furthermore, what I also hear often is that if colleagues are discussing each other, even when I'm in board and we have to discuss the people in the team, how they're performing, most of the times when someone is a high performer, it's because they are so quick in responding to their emails. So it also became a judgment on how people work, which I can easily, now with AI, I can easily make sure that I respond very quickly, but does it make sense? I don't know. And a lot of people, if I ask them at the end of the day, like, was your day successful? They say, well, or they say, well, my inbox is clean. You know, I have my evening. Or they say, well, I have another ton of emails that I have to do tonight. So the technology became a driver for how we feel and perceive that we perform in a company. Then at Microsoft, we got the cloud. So Bill Gates at that time wrote a paper. We have a technology where we can work any place, anytime, anywhere. Which was actually meant to look what you have to do, what's the task or the work that you have to do, and what is the place where you want to do that. So I think at that time when we introduced it, it was really helpful for me because I was like, okay, if I go to the office, I'm there to meet people. If I need to create something, I find a silent place. So it helped me in finding a place and finding a way and a technology to do my work better. But nowadays, I think we run from meeting to another email to meeting. Yeah? So it's actually guiding us instead of that we are guiding it. And I was at that time around 31, 32. We didn't know, or we didn't foresee that it became a discussion like work and life balance. I had to ask the people in my team, like, when do you stop working? Because I couldn't decide if working in the evening for them was good or not. So I got complete different discussions. Work-life balance in most companies where I come is the biggest frustration, discussion, and still unclear way to move forward. And then we go into like, well, it's 2 days a week, 3 days a week. Some companies should work 5 days a week together because that's their business. They need to be creative together. And others, I have a team of developers, they can easily work 5 days from home. So it's not about rules that we create. And to be real fair, my generation and the generation before me is still in the driver's seat in most companies. But my children, they're 21, I have two daughters, twins. My children have seen me juggling with this work-life balance. So they don't know differently. So they come in the workplace, and then actually I'm judging myself also on that topic that I think, well, first do a lot of work, and then maybe when you are like 30, then you can loosen up a bit. That's how I worked, but that's not how they're gonna work. And we have shown the example, so we should be proud of that. But we also have to deal with it. And if I now read all the stuff and I read the researches, etc., the newspapers, I ask myself always the question, is this despite or thanks to AI? AI has also become an excuse for a lot of companies to change. So if you read about reorganizations because of AI, don't buy into that. It's a nice excuse because you don't have to say that you didn't manage your business well. But I've not seen any. I see experiments, I see processes being optimized. I see a lot of people in the workplace using generative AI or working with Copilot, etc. But really in the essence of the workplace that makes you be able to get rid of people is not there yet. And not for very soon, so we keep on working harder. But we go to a more hybrid work 2.0. So that's how I call it. But it's like you first have to decide what work you're doing. Then you have to decide where do I do it and which technology do I use. But then the question will arise, like, do I do this? Or is there a technology that can help me doing this? So it's more three-dimensional in how we do that. But if that's the case, then do we become a manager? So you're guiding technology. Is that actually what our world will look like? That's my fear. That I am kind of a robot and then guiding, creating tasks or deciding if I think the quality is right or not. So I'm not guiding my work. I'm get guided by work that's being done by technology. So if I look to some of the researchers, and of course you have done a lot more research, but what I find in the workplace important to address, CEOs, they have a really, really strong belief on how many time we can save. They need to. They need to drive productivity. We haven't improved productivity in the last 20 years, so they think finally we have something where we can drive productivity. But the people working with AI, they don't see it. So if I'm in organizations, the discussions that I have with CEOs and the people on the work floor is so different that there's such a big gap that the CEO, and actually where I'm working now is the same, says we need it, we need it, we need it, we need it now. And the workforce is like, okay, well, where, how, what, how do I get supported? Without the discussion that's in between. Where should we use it? Why don't we? Well, at some places where don't we use it? So this is a big situation in most of the companies now. And the CEOs together, they think that the other CEOs are really far ahead. But we haven't seen it in the workforce. productivity, the promise number one of the technology. I think if I look at the work that's being done, I told my team not to send me emails with AI anymore. Because I got emails that were like this long. Because if you start to use AI, you think, oh, this is also relevant. Oh, this might also be relevant. Oh, this is also nice information. And then I have to, or I can throw it through AI and say, what's the essence here? And then you find like what's lost in translation. But it doesn't make sense. Where usually we started to think like, this is what the other side of the email wants to hear. And now we think like, oh, it's relevant content. Let's just send it over. Might be useful. And the cost part, I recently spoke to a CEO in a big data company. His team of developers spent €12,000 per person per month on tokens. So tokens is the new value for, of course, the big tech companies. And to bring it further home, my husband, he is a software architect, so he uses a lot of agents. We'll get back to that later. But I asked him, like, what do you spend on tokens? He was like, nah, not so much. I think €200-300. And I said, go and have a look. €2,500 in 2 weeks. So if we say we're going to get rid of people, and maybe there might be a good business case that you say, well, we spend it here, but we gain it over there. But this is something that most people that are now in companies trying to implement AI don't take into account. And if I now have to make budgets for next year as a CIO, I can't because I don't know. Because people start using it. So it's like what we had with mobile phones, like each minute. Well, I remember the first time that I had to pay for it. I'm like, oh, okay. So of course we will start to learn, but it's difficult. We easily say that let's just get rid of the repetitive, boring tasks. And where we actually see that happening a lot is in call centers or front end with customers. So I work a lot with these call center companies. And the first and second line is done by AI. The third line is done by people that have all the problematic, difficult cases. They see a triple amount of people in burnouts. So the question is, are we ready for that difficult, strategic, etc. tasks? Or is part of doing easy tasks or relevant tasks very important for our work happiness and our feeling of contributing to a company? Or for some people, like having a to-do list where you can just check in the box, it's satisfying. So I think if you start to implement it, it's wise to think about, okay, if someone is doing this, let's not do that for a full day. I don't say you have to get rid of the first and second line support of AI, but let's think about what the people that are in the third line will need to stay healthy, to stay happy, and to contribute in a way that they feel satisfied. And in a one-person team, I think we see already quite some people, they distinguish themselves from the office. We have the work-life balance, so we can work from home. And if you work with a bunch of agents, you don't need to talk to your colleagues anymore. Your colleagues are your agents. And I get back a lot from people that they start to feel lonely. They're the full day, and then, they manage all these agents, and it doesn't make sense. And that leads to, I think, the new smoking is the techno stress. I spoke to you about my husband. He is a software architect. He has several agents working for him. And a couple of weeks ago, it was nice weather as well. We went to the beach in the evening to have dinner there. And every time it was like bloop, 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 bloop. And an agent was ready with the task and asked him to give the next task or control the task. You can imagine I was not very happy. But I said, well, let it go. And he said, no, 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 it's nice. And I mean, he really got excited about it. Then the next move was he created an AI manager to manage this software, but no, it's just a line in between. But I'm in a group with a lot of people who are experimenting with this, and they actually all say it's really addictive. It's so nice, gets fast, it gets done, blah, blah. So I see at home already, even if we have done, no, let me just check it. And agents don't sleep. They don't have a weekend, they don't sleep. Well, you might be able to put a rule there, but from our perspective, and a lot of people are really keen on trying to, to collaborate with it because it's so cool for most people. But looking at the effect that it has on who you are or how you spend your day is really big. Another urgency that I see is a lot of companies are now only hiring media and senior people with AI and no junior people anymore. So how do we think as companies moving ahead of what's coming and who is the next generation being there? I know in Japan, because of course there it's already moving faster in getting people in retirement. They have again the philosophy that the elderly people should really educate the younger people. But do we feel responsibility here? And do we feel a responsibility with the slop, the AI slop? So how we are going to, how many information are we going to create together? And the data centers that use our energy. But the main question is, what do we want with AI for me? So I look at work happiness and the context of meaningful work. And meaningful work is not so much like I work for a company that has a purpose, but it's about are my skills being used and my experience and my talents? Do I do relevant tasks and do I feel autonomy? And all those three are now, in discussion. And that's why so many people are afraid to lose their job, but also afraid to lose their identity and their added value. Because this is then our future team that we're managing. And still here I have a human manager, but if you're an Uber driver, you already have an AI boss. And so that can turn around. And if you look at the skills, I think everyone is becoming technical. I do a lot with farmers here in the Netherlands, which is a lot about robotization, but everyone has to step up and become more tech savvy. Because also the equipment is going fast. And I divide the knowledge that we need to have in 4 things, which is our intelligence. And I think there we start to become, it becomes difficult because we see that there's a tool that has much more information and therewith is much more intelligence, we think, than we are. But on the other, and we discuss the intelligence from our cognitive perspective. So I was at the stage before and there was a guy who created music with the people in the room. And everyone was like, oh, this is, wow. I'm excited that it's possible that a tool can do that. Then later on, when I asked them, like, who was moved by the music we created, no one raised a finger. So the empathy, the emotion, is I think still what is needed in when we create things or when we do our work. The third one is our ethical and moral quotation. So in all the boards that I am, the ethics are always part of the decision of what we're gonna do. And we know what ethics we feel because everyone has them. It's not something you have to learn, but you have to give it space and time on the agenda if you start to roll things out. And the last is about being adaptive. How can we adapt to this situation? And that's already for quite a long time in organizations a topic. But here we don't know because we're guiding with something that's smart and it's fast and it's uncontrollable and unpredictable. So that's why I work with leaders on their regenerative leadership, and regenerative leadership comes from our climate. Like, how do you look at the longer future? But I think this technology also requires from our leadership to look at the longer term. Like, how do we want to remain, and what do we need in our company to get there? So it's human. It's about that question, like, what don't we want to lose? If you look at how you're gonna organize that, I love this. It's from Harvard Business Review that says, okay, we need to go more and more and more to project-driven organization. If all the repetitive tasks are being done, then how do we work as a project? And the skills that we will have and the AI tools that we will have go across all the teams that we have. So the task that you do might be relevant for sales or for marketing or for finance, because it's the same task that you do and not because you're in a specific team. And I think I heard a lot about the previous speaker. If we're going to implement this, and if we want to learn with our leadership, if we want to reorganize, AI is about reorganizing our work, reorganize our organizations, start with the learning organization and not just say, okay, we're going to do things, we see if it works and we're going to promote it. But this is a time where all the assumptions should be debated. The assumptions on our people, on how we do our work and why we do it. So in my current company, we have taken some processes and we said, okay, we're going to go from zero. First, do we still need that process? And if, then how are we going to do it? And the first question, what don't we want to lose? And the second question, where can technology help us? So it's asking from us to reassume like how work is being done, and if that's because we always did it this way or that we can and want to do it differently. So being advanced instead of waiting for the technology to be there. So the first question for your company in a purpose is, what does meaningful work look like? And I will give an example for KLM that's not so much AI driven but technology driven. At a certain moment, we could scan our own tickets. We could have our bags. We could bring our own bags to the counter. There were 20 people behind the desk for KLM, and they said, "Okay, I think we only need 3 for the exceptions. What do we do with the other 17?" Luckily, they didn't say we're going to fire them, but they said, as KLM, we have the purpose that if you're Dutch, you feel at home. If you're a foreigner, you feel welcome. So what you see is those hostesses are now walking around. They have an iPad where they have the information. So we taught them again to, like, how do you interact with people? When do you step in or not, etc. All those 17, well, it was a lot more, but like the remaining people said, this is why I started to work here. Not to be behind a computer and just scan your tickets. So it connected to the purpose, it connected to meaningful work for them. We looked at what they need, in this case an iPad with information, and how do we make them engaged in the skilling that they had to learn a little bit in putting that in practice. So to look first at the impact that you want based on where you're at and how you want to be in the future. And then only say, okay, what does that mean for my people and how do I engage with technology? If you want to learn more in Dutch, unfortunately I make some podcasts. And what I do like is to also from your end to look into all the research. I think we do so much nice research, but I feel that the voice of mainly the tech companies or tech people that say the tech is so cool, which is true, it needs to have a contra voice on like what do we see happening. So thank you for doing that and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Saskia. Questions in the audience?
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. My name is Jan Bouwens. I'm from the University of Amsterdam. My question is to do with, so if you look into research about working from home, right,
Yep.
and you refer to that a lot, then, when it comes to creativity and to cooperation, and if much cooperation is required and if creativity is required, to perform the job well, actually it's far better to work together, in a room
Yeah.
with people rather than, working from home.
Yeah.
So how does that relate to your point that, that with AIs, right, you can also create creativity and so how do you see that developing from your perspective? If you look at AI and cooperation, creativity
Yeah.
versus human
Agree. Yeah.
interaction and creativity and working together.
Yeah. So on meaningful work, I always ask people, especially when I'm in workshops or in companies, what is really meaningful work for you? It's always about connecting people. So I've done something together with my colleagues, or I've helped a colleague, or I've talked to customers, etc. I feel at this moment that we think we are creative. For example, for my presentation, I try to use AI. And I thought, well, it's relevant information. But then when I started to use it, I was like, it's not mine. It doesn't, I couldn't bring it across. How I think about it is when I walk in the park or when I talk to people or when I read stuff. So I think we're not creative with AI. It's good enough. There was a research, I think 2 weeks ago, from recruiters that they said, okay, had the application letters. The 20% that was really bad is not there anymore. So everyone can write a good letter. But the 20% that was surprising is not there either. So we just moved to the 60%. That's good enough. And that's why I said with the emails, yes, you think like, oh, it's also nice information, it's nice, but you stop thinking. So therefore, if you're, for example, if I work with my teams and I need to do something creative, they have to be in the office. I hate it when then we have 1 or 2 people calling in. So.
I also saw recently the claim that, AI is more creative than any human can be. So
That depends on what creativity you need.
Yeah.
Is it about thinking differently, or is it creative in, oh, hey, you have this information, you could also use that information, etc. But being, I honestly, I find I'm surprised in a way that always with my cognition that I think like, oh, clever that he knows that. But I've never been surprised about, wow, what a great creative idea. So, but maybe that will come, I don't know.
More questions? Yeah. Okay, I'll try.
Hi, this is Chris from robotics. Really recognize the addictiveness to agents and also the almost feeling guilty if they're not working. So
Yeah.
it's on one hand, the opportunity cost of not working is way higher because your perceived efficiency at least is higher.
Yeah.
But also what I really find interesting is the Skinner effect, like the slot machine effect.
Yeah.
You pull the slot machine and something comes out.
Yeah.
And how that plays out in the long term. So what is your view? Will this be mitigated once the AI gets better, so more consistent, and also when we get used to it? Or will we first go to a more extreme phase of this?
I think, but that's personal, and I think if on stage you see people who are really optimistic, really pessimistic, I think I'm in between. But I don't understand why everyone says it's so nice that we can now record our meetings and we can transcribe. And if I ask people, do you ever look back at it? No. So we are creating it. And that's really, I mean, here in Amsterdam, you have a big data center and we cannot build houses because the data center is using the energy. But anyway, so, my opinion is that we're moving towards that hype, and that's why I mentioned the tokens. That's gonna bring us a bit back to reality, because then you're gonna say like, where do I really need it? I love AI in hospitals and stuff because that's where we need it, and it brings value that we're allowed to pay. But just creating for the creation, I think it will start to cost us way more than we think right now.
So basically, technological friction is gonna slow us down.
I think
But then
so.
still, you got that urge that you want to record it, you want to do it. So
Yeah, but if it starts to cost a lot of money, then you think like, which one do I need to record? Because I need to reproduce it for people, but then you make sense of why you need to do it. And I think then it makes sense. So I really compare it to when the internet, everyone was from the internet, and then we had, of course, the internet bubble. I don't know if it will be a bubble, but then we started to think about where does it make sense? Not with social media. There. Yeah. No. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, works better. I have two now. Lucky me. There seem to be mixed signals on the productivity gains. And could that also be because of where you attribute the productivity gains to?
Yeah.
Because AI also brings across a different way of working.
Yeah.
And what we see in practice is that certainly, so the more standardized work and a more streamlined process brings that those first productivity gains. So keen to hear your
Yeah,
thoughts.
so
on that.
it's a difficult topic. The researchers that I follow is mainly perceived productivity. So it's not in really hours that you think. So we're still not there that we can really see financially or in hours how it changed. Because if we say, do you save time? People start like, no, I'm busier than ever. People perceive now quite some productivity, like, oh wow, this is going fast. But I also see that I had a CEO lately from a big hotel company. He said, so nice, I make my own newsletters, I do my own finance, I create letters for my attorneys, really nice. I said, how many hours do you work? So it feels for her productive, but does it make sense? But I think the productivity, I know that there is a lot of research going on really to make it specific instead of being it perceived. But again, that's the question. So people perceive it's faster to do stuff, but at the end, the people that receive it take more time, or you take more time to do all the things that are around there at this moment. But I think, yes, if we do it well, it can lead to productivity, but that's an end goal. And the first goal is like, is it customer, and is it related to customers or quality or happiness or etc.
More questions? Maybe I can ask a question.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of audit practitioners in the
Yeah.
room, and they work on project basis, I would say.
Yeah.
You talked about that. What would be your number one recommendation to them in terms of, they are now, they are some of the firms that are claiming that they now do AI-enabled audits and and use AI and are really experimenting with it.
Yeah. Yeah, so my first question would be, what is your new business model? Because your customers will ask you, like, what do you do with AI? And if I pay you per hour, why should I do that? And I had some big companies in my board memberships that were really happy, say, we work a lot with AI. And then I asked them, what's in it for me? And I got no answers. And I'm not there to spend less cost. That's what we immediately then think, like, oh, I'm going to lose my business. But it's about what value do you still create as a human being towards your customers. If I will never be an attorney. Also with AI, I will never be a good coder if I use vibe code. I will do what I do best, and AI will support me on that. So if I need an attorney or someone's helping with me with my audit, it's about being an advisor, helping me with knowledge that I don't have, or taking away fears that I might have, etc. And that's the value that you create, and that you should put into a new customer-facing added value, I think. Yeah. But if we keep on the hours, then everyone will start to discuss like what's from you and what's from AI. So you need to have an answer on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for this very inspiring presentation. My name is Lucia from the University Duisburg-Essen, and I'm here as a researcher, but I'm also educator. And so something that I've been thinking a lot recently is how do we prepare our students for this new work world, right? Because you alluded to a lot of elements, like, okay, probably the V's people are now less likely to be hired. We see it also because of recession issues, but now AI comes in, it gives an excuse for firms to not hire new, younger people, right? But we need them also to get the experience so that they understand the output of AI. And to a certain extent now I'm wondering, how do we get out of this tension, or how can we help these young people to navigate this new, to me, disruptive situation on the workplace?
Yeah. I think it's a tough question because we don't know what we educate our people for, and we have never done so. But if I think at a university and in education, or in every education, it's about are you being taught to be critical about the topic that you have. I see a lot of universities say, no, you cannot use it. Others say, well, go ahead and use it. But I think the way we ask students to do things should be different. So my daughters went to a different type of high school where it was all about being able to express yourself, dialogue, confront ideas, etc. And I think that's what we need. Creating a paper, yeah, in 15 minutes you could create a paper if you want to. And I think if you look at the skills, that's what we need. What I do find difficult is indeed like what muscle do we teach them with in the workplace? And there I see a couple of things happening. Indeed, young people are not being hired. I think that will change because of the fact that we don't have people for the future. But I also see, I guided a group of girls studying AI and mathematics. They don't find jobs. So the guys, we think men with technology are better. Actually, in the workplace, women using AI are being seen as, well, they might need it because they don't know. For men, it's a strategic choice. So we have a lot of values and cultural things there. But educating them to be critical, I think that's the biggest part. My daughter studying AI here in Amsterdam. The first 1.5 years, she could not touch a computer. They said you first have to really understand it with your head and you're writing it down, etc. And of course she was really annoyed by it. But I now see that it really helped her. So yeah, we are, especially in the education part, we're really discussing. But if we keep it to the old and have people being judged or get diplomas based on how we did it, I think intelligence is becoming more obsolete than having ethical discussions, moral discussions, and being critical and creative in what you do. But I don't envy you. It's tough.
Thank you so much, Saskia.
Thank you.
Very inspiring talk.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please give her a big hand of applause.
Thank you.
Klein dankjewel.
Ja, dankjewel. Hè.
Veel bedankt.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right. So we now move to the final, very, very final session of the conference. And this presentation will be given by Twan van Drunen and Gosse Overal. Twan is a senior director at PwC Netherlands National Office, and Gosse is a senior data scientist also at PwC. And in their session, we're now moving all across the spectrum from having thought very broadly about AI and what that does to the workforce and in terms of human computer and technology interaction to very much real-world audit applications. So the presenters will show us how they combine audit practice and advanced analytics, maybe not AI, but definitely advanced analytics, to predict compliance and audit engagement quality reviews. So shows us actually hands-on application of what can be done today. So really hands-on practical application, but also an academic one. They collaborate with Maastricht University on a paper that's currently under review at an academic journal. So Twan and Gosse, the floor is yours. We're very happy to have you.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna. Good morning, everyone. Is the sound okay? This is a bit of an unusual setting for us, so I hope we'll do fine in hearing us. All right, so yesterday, Robert, I think, mentioned that researchers want ever more data. And that researchers are like children in a candy store. We happen to own a candy store, so that's the good news for our research. We didn't have that problem. So that's one box ticked. Then in this research, we needed some auditing research expertise, which we found in the name of Anne van Stalen from Maastricht, who was so kind to help us to make this academically sound. We thought we had a good plan. We thought we had a good idea and research, but academically, you know, things are a little bit different sometimes, and it's good that she challenges on a lot of things. So she really helped out. We do have 2 PhDs on the list, which are also here. One of them is Gosse, next to me. He's our machine learning or data engineer, I should say. And she, who's also in the room, by the way, she's over there. She will speak tomorrow in Maastricht together with me. Also, she's the statistician on the team. And then, well, myself, I'm an experienced auditor. I've been auditing for 25 plus years, responsible for a lot of technical consultations in our firm for the past, 15 years or so. So I'm really into auditing. Yeah, I think that was it for this slide. Oh, here's that's good. I need to see how this works. The big one? No, it's responding a bit slow. Yeah, okay. All right, let's start with this message of humbleness. We're going to talk about a predictive model, and predictive models are never perfect. So they're simplifications of reality. So if you want to know what the weather will be today, which is actually rather nice, and I think Anna predicted yesterday that it would be based on some weather forecast, and it is, so that's good. But sometimes the weather forecast is wrong. Still, it's better to have a forecast than no forecast. So that's how we look at this. It's a bit of a glass is half full, half empty story. If you want to start predicting, the first model you build will not be perfect. It may get better over time, but perfect it will never be. And that is something that George Box, who is a very influential statistician, taught us. He's been involved in this field for a long time. It's not about how accurate these models are, but how useful they are. What can you do with them? And that's what we will talk about later today. Yeah, so there are all these predictive models out there in the world, and I think they have a lot of use cases. We just saw a picture in, I think, in the previous presentation on Spotify. Spotify makes these suggestions for you of playlists which you find interesting. They're often spot on, right? So it's a good predictive model, which music you like, so the model works. Good predictive model. Weather forecast, same example. I think there are other examples of, for example, car manufacturers predicting the maintenance that needs to be done on cars to make them more reliable. So that is something how Japanese car makers made their cars more reliable during the 80s and 90s. That is a well-known application of this. There are many more examples of predictive models that worked. So in our research, I'll continue in the next slide. Yeah, we have a case study. So this is, we have all this data, but it's just one firm. It's important to mention that the outcome of our research may be different if you would run it at a different firm or in a different territory, the same firm. So we cannot tell that. But it is very insightful, I think, to see what came out of this. If you apply machine learning to a set of really high quality data from the set that we investigated. So we got this paper under review at the Journal Auditing and Journal of Practice and Theory. The title you can read on the screen. And we hope to add to existing knowledge in the academic field. We have really no commercial gain from this whole thing of cooperating with Maastricht. I just thought it was a great idea to share with the world what we have found out. So really, there's nothing behind this. There's no catch. All right, I've got a few more slides before Gosse can make it really interesting. Hang on with me, please. All right, so please keep these three things in mind when we start talking through the harder part. It's an imbalanced data set. All right, so we looked at all these internal inspection results. So we looked at all these engagements that went through in what we call an EQR. I'm sure other firms have different acronyms for them, but we do a lot of internal inspections. It was the best source of data that we could find that was stable and large enough to do some statistical analysis on. We had other sources, but there was always something wrong with them. So we chose for this. But unfortunately for us, well, fortunately for them, but for us, is almost none of them are non-compliant. So only 18 of that large data set was non-compliant, and the vast majority was compliant. So how do you build a model? How do you predict rain in the desert? You know, that's sort of what we're trying to do. If it never rains, you have no data, right? So that's what we're doing. We found a solution for it. Gosse will talk about that. There are technologies for it, but it was a big challenge. Another one is live data. So once you have your model, great, it works. But then what do you do if you try to start to apply it? Because this data is moving. It's, you know, when you do your study, you have a nice test and train data set, and it's all archived files. You know how many hours were spent on engagement, what the fees were, you know, what timing of certain steps in the procedure were, how many people were involved. We have all this process data, we've got all this stuff. And it's all nicely set in stone because it's archived files. But in reality, it's all moving. So when you look today at something else than tomorrow, how do we predict with that sort of changing circumstance? Sometimes data sources aren't even known until just before a sign-off. For example, the time it takes between preparing and reviewing a work paper, which was actually something important for our research, we found that that is something that is accelerating. It goes a lot quicker towards the deadline. I guess that's human behavior driving it, that people rush to the deadline, and at the end, they do the tasks a lot quicker. So that's an important thing to remember. The last thing is explainability. So when we had a first version of this model, and we had some conversations with some engagement leaders, I think we started off with saying like, yeah, we got this model, and it says that your engagement has a higher risk of non-compliance in the internal inspection. All right, so freaking somebody out, and that person responded and said, yeah, why? Yeah, we can't really tell you, it's the model, you know. So computer says no, that's not going to go well. That conversation, so it needs to be explainable. But how do you explain such a complicated model, which is built on all these, this algorithm? You know, it's asking Spotify why they selected that song in your playlist. It's difficult for them to explain. So that is something we found a solution for. It wasn't easy. All right, so, all right, I need to work together here. So why is this? Well, I guess this isn't hard to explain. Why did we want this? At engagement level, it's really good to provide red flags, let teams know, like, hey, you might want to focus on that engagement a bit more, maybe. We found something that may have slipped off the radar. And at firm level, the same thing applies. We really thought we could move the firm from a detective monitoring quality system to a preventative model, where we saw things coming before they went wrong. So before sign-off, we could still adjust things and help the firm really move, accelerate. So that was the big why. So that wasn't hard to sell also internally to spend some time on this. So the what? It's a statistical study, and it's predictive. Yesterday, I think we heard something in the panel, some discussion over that compliance slows down innovation, and I think that is generally true. But I want to play the Uno reverse card here because we want to innovate compliance. So we do it the other way around. The easy part of our research really was that we started with this study, almost 10 years of engagement compliance review data, 44 variables that we pulled together from all sorts of angles. I'll explain shortly how we got to those. And then the key question that we wanted to answer was, within this population of EQRs, what are the quantifiable factors that had an influence on the outcome of the EQR, and to what extent? So what are the drivers for audit quality if you look at it purely with a machine? So not a human intervention, but just with a machine. What do they make out of it? But you need a list of things to look at, because you can look at engagement names, for example, and then completely fitting, that's the right word, overfitting the model, because you just say only those ones with those names are always non-compliant, and you have a 100% perfect predictive model, but it will not work on new engagements, right? So that's just a very basic explanation of how the model should not work. So how did we get to these? We used earlier research that was done within the firm. Years ago, we did all these investigations over root causes, and that had led to this iceberg model where we said we see these things at the surface, and then below that there's this layer, below that why, and you got at the bottom to some themes where you say, okay, here we got some things going on. And as one of the examples was coaching and feedback, that was a theme. I think some discussions or presentations during this conference have been about this concept as well, that it is important that the work of preparers is reviewed carefully by somebody with more expertise, and that they learn them how to do their work, and they guide them along, and they coach how to do that properly. So we found that sometimes, as one of the themes in our firm, that didn't always go well. It was either too late, or it wasn't robust enough. They didn't find everything. They clicked reviewed, but it still contained some errors, something like that. So then the question became relevant, which Gosse is going to jump into. What quantitative data do we have for those things?
Sure. Thanks. Yeah, so I manage a candy store. I work with a bunch of technical people on my team to mostly do BI work within the firm, but from the BI work, all these KPIs, all this information we bring to the engagement leaders and decision makers, we have variables available already, and some things that aren't necessarily on the level where we want it, but they are also available in the data store. And some things that are not. So looking at the example here, we have coaching and feedback. Then you could look at the review within the working papers that the people have to do on the audit files. And there's examples here. So the average time for the working paper to be reviewed after it was prepared by a more junior person. That is something that you can look at, that's quantifiable, that's already in our data store, and we can take it on and use it as a predictor in this model. So that's a good example of it's available, it's good, we can use it. We also have a feedback system, because we think feedback is very important. So people provide feedback not just in the moment informally, but also with this system. They write things down, they rate things, and we found that accessing that data was problematic for defendable reasons, and the decision was made not to take this information into account because it was protected a bit too much, and that also made sense to us. So there's not just a selection on which things do we think are the most valuable, but also what is just available. We are still a firm that is trying to do things efficiently, let's say. So there are some limitations. So we have our variables available. We have our dependent variable. We're trying to predict compliance. How do we then do this? So this is where we go a little bit into some more technicality. So I want to just quickly give you a bit of a path we went through over time. So obviously we did logistic regression. We just looked at each variable separately, seeing which variables are most meaningful in predicting this. and the results there are consistent with the model we came to at the end, like the things you would expect after the full model to be of the most influence. They also show up in the logistic regression, so that's great. But for predicting with the multivariate analysis that we want to do, we looked at maybe all the variables at the same time. So multivariate regression also makes sense, but from a data scientist perspective, you're just taking a big knife and you're slicing through all the variables and you're going this side compliant, this side non-compliant. It's a bit crude. We looked toward decision trees, which is, to go to the challenges again, very explainable. You can say, well, we turned left here, right there, due to this variable and then that variable, and therefore we found, in some sense, you're again taking a knife to your state space and you're slicing it one way, then the other way, and then the other way, and you end up with a little box, and you say this box is non-compliant. And you can tell the engagement leader, it's like your engagement is in this box because if I take the slices, this is where you end up. Very explainable, not very robust, and still quite crude. So we started stacking decision trees, creating 1,000 decision trees, taking the average, less explainable, still not very robust. So we landed on something where decision trees are still in the middle, which is the XGBoost machine learning. So in the background, there's still decision trees, but they're used more smartly, let's say. And this learning algorithm really helped us because there's a couple of advantages. There's automatically in there's some weighting for the imbalanced data set, so we can say, well, these non-compliant things are a little bit more important because we have less of them, but that's still what we want to predict. So give a bit more weight to that and less to the compliant, so we can find some predictions, some distinctions. And it also deals with missing data because we don't necessarily create all of our data through the surveys and make sure that they are complete for everything. We gather this data from our data stores that's already present, and then sometimes a certain value will be missing for various reasons. We worked a lot to make sure that we have the highest data quality that we can, but in the end we still had sometimes variables where we had like 97% completion of the finding of enough data, and then do you dismiss this variable because you don't have 3% of the data, or do you somehow want to account for this? And this is in the model in there as well. Okay, so we have our machine learning technique. I'll shut up about that a little bit more. So for the statistics, to make sure we don't do the overfitting, which is obviously still a big concern with such an imbalanced data set, such a small data set from a statistical point of view. We really split it into a train and validation set on the one hand, about 70% of our data, to make sure that that's where we train the model, and then we evaluate it on an independent test set, 30% of the data, with a nice split with still some non-compliance in there, to make sure that what effect that we can find, nothing stellar, but actual information gain, was independent from the training set. So that's great. So if we move back to the challenges, we've definitely challenged, taken care of this first one. The imbalanced data set we can deal with just through the algorithm that we used. Then for the live data, we took a practical approach, right? So we mostly work with repetitive engagements. So we have engagements from last year, most of the time available in some way. So for some of the variables, you can say, as an example, what is the engagement leader tenure? What is their experience going into the engagement? That is a variable that you can definitely go towards early on during the engagement. But for something like the time to review, the example that we had before, you definitely want to wait until the engagement is archived before you give a final decision on what this variable is going to be, because deadlines increase the speed. But splitting this into these categories and also being transparent in our communication, what variable did we take as an input towards your prediction at this moment, that really helped. But explainability was still an issue. So let me go on to CHAP values. So in here, you can see a bit of a hierarchy in the variables that are in there. The list goes further down, but then the letters really become very small. So there's more variables still in our model. These are the ones that have the most influence. They have the most influence as the average of the Shep value. But the Shep value that we look at, in some sense, it's not necessarily on the total population a number. It is really when we, after we created the model, we come up with a prediction, right? You're this likely to be compliant, or we give a score, and the closer you are to 1, the closer to compliant prediction you get, and the closer you are to 0, the closer you are to non-compliance. And then for each of the variables in the model, we say that it kind of helps towards this prediction, either pushing it more towards compliant or pushing it more towards non-compliant, given the situation of the other variables that you have in there. So as a theoretical way of saying it, so as an analogy, because I used to do inline skating, imagine a half pipe, right? I don't know if you've ever been in one or you've seen one, right? It's this kind of U-shaped place where you can fall down a lot. So if I'm going to predict whether you are going to be falling down in the half pipe, then a very important variable that would probably be at the top is like, where are you precisely? Are you on the edge, right? It's probably a bad place to be, or a little bit over the edge, you're going to slip and fall. Or are you in the middle, the nice little flat part, where you can just be balanced? So it's a great variable, but for a specific person, like if I take a picture of this half pipe, for every person I'm going to predict it, there are other things than the placement where it's useful, right? Is it a toddler? Well, in the flat part, they're also going to fall over. Is it someone on high heels? Or is it someone wearing inline skates, and do they kind of know what they're doing, right? So they might be on the vertical part, and still I'm quite confident they're not going to fall down because they've done it a million times, right? The same goes for the variables that we have. So here at the top is the average number of reviewers for the working papers. That is a very important variable. But for the specific engagement, there might be reasons that the other variables come into play, and they say like, well, in this case, it doesn't matter so much towards my prediction. Does that make sense a little bit? Okay, so if we take the data that was the whole training set and the whole test set, and we apply the model, then you can get, for the top variables in there, you can get the Shep values, just to kind of get an idea of what those things are. They're very useful for communication. It's a little bit hard to read graph in here, but this is a dot plot, right? So on the horizontal axis, you have actual values of the training input set for specific engagements. And if you take the picture on the left here, the average number of reviewers, there you can see that, you know, having a low amount of reviewers generally makes us predict that this is not very helpful towards your chance of being compliant. And if you move more towards the right, then it becomes more apparent, but it's non-linear, right? So at some point, if you add a fourth or a fifth reviewer, it's not going to help so much anymore. But you can also see, well, and here we do obviously are overfitting, but you can see just in the verticality of the plot, for the same input variable, our Shep value, our idea of how much is this variable influencing our overall prediction, might vary by a lot, right? So this is all the other variables as the kind of other observation that you see is like, where does this really matter so much for this specific place? Still, overall, if you're a little bit more to the left, on this first plot at least, we're more likely to say there's non-compliance. If you're more to the right, it's more likely to say compliance. But they go together. Same for the other variable. There you see a descending relationship, right? So custom working papers means people don't take a template that was created by our methodology team, but they take an empty plate to say this is the standards we're going to be using. If they do that a lot, then that is a predictor for non-compliance. But still, regarding the rest of the things, and especially, for instance, if you take these two variables at the same time, if you have a lot of custom working papers, but you don't have so much a review on the work that's then being done, then you're really in the kind of trouble zone, right? So the combination of factors comes into play. Okay, a lot of technical. So then we go, how do we actually communicate this with our engagement leaders? And this is where it's a really interesting dashboard, right? So here we take for your specific engagement, the total score was 0.73, which is relatively low. It's below a threshold. That's why we're having a conversation with you. Why is it below 73? Well, if you look towards the right on this picture, there's a couple of red SHEP values. These SHEP values are mostly adding towards this. So obviously this is a Power BI dashboard, right? So you would click on one of these plot points. It would single out the specific variable. There at the top you can see this is the input that we took. It was either this year or it was last year's based on what type of variable it is. And that's what's going on. And then you can have a conversation. And what we've noticed is that those conversations are very valuable. So as an anecdote, one of the conversations that we had was we sent this email to this engagement leader. We'd like to talk about this engagement for you because it's below the threshold thing for our predictive model. And then in the conversation, they said, I have 4 engagements, and I thought it would be either one of the other 3. And this is the one that I wouldn't have ever guessed that you were signaling. So please tell me why, right? And then we said, well, you have your percentage of vacancy hours is very high, and the percentage of manager hours is quite low. So we expect that there's a bit of discrepancies, mostly partner director and senior associate hours. And then they said, yeah, my manager quit. So I don't have anyone doing that part of the work at this moment. I'm doing it myself. I think I'm managing because this client, it's great. They're quite rich. They have their affairs in order. So I should be okay. So in the conversation, we kind of went from, I wouldn't expect this engagement to have any faults to, it's a good quality client, but actually the affairs weren't necessarily in order with the planning. So from this conversation, the engagement leader took, I should put a bit more priority on getting a manager on this engagement again, because there's a risk if I do everything myself, there will be, some errors in there, because I don't have the time to spend that a manager would spend on this. So, let me just go to takeaways from this. What I'd like you to take away from this is that if you have a giant data set, still the characteristics, and you're going to do machine learning, the characteristics of the data set will dictate what kind of model works well for you. And if you have something like us, a very imbalanced data set, which I think is actually quite likely, right? You're looking at going concern data, you're looking at fraud data, you're looking at quality review data, all of those things has a very imbalanced kind of set, then maybe using XGBoost would work well for you as well. And what we've noticed over time as well is that if you want to create value, then you have to give specific feedback on why your prediction is a certain way. And the conversation is definitely more valuable than just the dashboard on its own. And to circle back to Twan's point, the value of this model was in how it was used to create those valuable conversations and not necessarily in the whole technical point, even though that's what I find most interesting. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Kind of lost my catch boxes, but maybe finally we will do what they're supposed to be doing. Oh, they're back there. Yeah, throw them to each other. Any questions? Back there. Throw it.
No liability. Let us almost conference. But thank you very much for a very interesting presentation, Chibbe, from the VU. Something I was wondering, right, with the custom work papers and having been at PwC myself for 10 years, do you see a tension with autonomy of auditors, right, and kind of thinking outside of the box and designing their work themselves versus kind of forcing them into a template? Because we have some experimental evidence, right, that see some downsides of checklists and templates, even though, right, you find pretty strong results on those. Wondering what your view is.
Yeah, well, I think the benefit of this research is that it was not biased towards one or the other.
Yeah.
So the machine decided, and this is the outcome. But it is only one firm, and I think in our templates you will find room to explain things. So it's not only tick the boxes. So it may be different at other firms where they have more tick box exercise with less room to document what you actually did. So the distinction that we made is really people who start with a complete empty sheet, which is the custom work papers. We call that like literally blank sheets. So that happens sometimes when you need to do a procedure there's no template for, compared to the ones that do have some templates. So it's a quite big difference, and maybe that's also why it's a bit extrapolated compared to the ones in the middle who do a bit of both. Yeah.
Maybe to add, there's another point is that we talk about audit quality, but in some sense our definition is compliance, right? We're predicting compliance, and then you're more likely to be non-compliant if you didn't follow so there's just in the definitions that we use, there's going to be some kind of bias, I would say.
Hi, Chris from Robotics again. Used to be work at KPMG as a manager, and I know there's a difference between time spent and time written. So my assumption is you used written hours in your prediction. Did you control for some way? Because especially near the end of an engagement, when the budget is already overdue, and you can swap around a bit with your hours. Do you correct for that? Do you see risk there that is influencing your model?
Yeah, I mean, so here I would say that is one variable, and we would control, like we control for most things in this research, is by we have these other variables as well, right? So we do have also the how close to a deadline people are working, or so there's some variables, not just on the hours that they write in the end, but also in when they finalize specific work. And how close that is together, for instance, I would say.
There are timestamps of tasks within the system behind it.
So for example, the magical review all button is something that would appear in the audit trail.
Yes.
It would, yes.
Yeah, okay, check.
Yeah.
Was that an answer to your question? Yeah. So this is Frank from Deloitte. And I guess I have a more general follow-up to both previous questions. And the first one would be, did you also think about, well, you already clarified that we're talking about compliance rather than quality, because that's a little bit more difficult concept, I guess. Did you also consider that over the past 10 years, because you are talking about 10 years worth of data on compliance, did you also consider that how people judge compliance levels or quality levels, whatever you want, differs from year to year? So there's a development in how people interpret particular standards and compliance with those standards. So that was one. And the other, and that's a more general question, I guess, to the previous question. In what way did you consider the reliability of all the input data?
Okay, 2 questions. Okay, on the first one, on the time, we did think about that. At the same time, it's unavoidable because a single year or only 2 or 3 years would deliver us a too small data set to do any statistical relevant research. So we were dependent on all those years. So we did check whether the questionnaire for the ECR changed significantly over the time, and it did not. So we did do some checks. It could be that there are some themes that there's more focus on in certain engagement quality reviews in certain years than in other years. So yeah, there is definitely a possibility that has influence on the outcomes. And I think it is an indicator of audit quality. It's not the indicator, right? So it's the best we could find. It's not the only one. It could be that one reviewer is very mild and the other one is really tough. It could be that somebody, I don't know. There are a lot of things that could influence the outcome. At the same time, it's the best data we have, and there is a due process with a lot of people following prepared guidance, and it's spread throughout the network. So it's not just a feeling someone has. It's well supported. Yeah. So I hope that's an answer to that first question. And the second one?
Yeah. So your second question, I think there's obviously we work with this data all the time, right? So we're a BI team mostly, so we constantly are scrutinizing the input that we get. And towards this modeling approach, I think there would be two ways out. One of them was, I worked with Jeroen, for instance, on this a lot. He would come back and say, like, I don't trust this data because of this and this. I test it for myself. And I would go into the depths of the algorithms and actually pull out more or scrutinizing more, transform it in such a way that it can be trusted more. Or there's also variables that we considered, for instance, with response time by the client, with them giving back the documents. Right? We request a document, they respond, and then so there's some interactions there. We had some variables on this, and we really didn't trust them, so we just excluded them from the research in the end. So it was less work for me, but also a solution.
I have plenty more questions, but I guess it's only fair to share.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
John, working for a pension fund. In our sector, improving models is important because you want for the people who are participating in your fund at the end a good retirement. So we are doing back testing and validation. Do you also do that within your company, for instance, working together with Germany or the UK, improving the model and your variables?
We would like to invite them to join us. The thing is that we are in the happy circumstance that the Netherlands firm has been quite open in giving us all this access. I think this is one of the novel aspects of this research. I haven't heard of other research going out, also internal within the firm, frankly. This is not something that is shared a lot. So that doesn't help in that, going internationally. The looking back, yeah, of course, you can run the same model next year and see if the new engagement quality review will find the same files that were also on our list, something like that. So we did do a bit of that, but the numbers, as you've seen, are quite low still. So, and the model isn't that old, so we're still working on that. But it is something we have on the radar.
Yeah. Jan Maus, thank you for this very nice presentation and the insights. So one thing that I was thinking about is, so you have a model, and then when you see for instance, a project or an audit actually deviate from, what you would predict that it should be in terms of the model, right? You're going to talk to these people, right? You gave that example. A potential issue with that is that people start to become really afraid, of making mistakes in that setting. So how do you deal with that, right? Because you must have encountered that as well, right? So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. Well, this is before they sign off, right? So there is still time for them to save. So this is not a conversation we will have on the day that they plan to sign off. So that will probably freak them out. We try to do it in time. At the same time, if you start too early, the prediction isn't that good. So there is an element of time in how you do this. So that's one. Time is important. Another one is important to be coaching these people. So we stuck it in our system of quality management in the part where we coach the teams. And I think other firms call it pre-issuance reviews or something. Others call it hot reviews. Others call it, I don't know, firms. Yeah, okay. So there are all sorts of terms, terminology used for this. But we coach those teams to make them better, and I think that's appreciated. As long as you don't bring it as you have a problem, I think that it's welcome. Yeah,
because that's a discussion that I also have with Peter. That was here yesterday. He is a big supporter of continuous auditing, right? But we know from research actually that that might actually lead to so much uncertainty in the organization that nothing happens anymore. So it's a bit it's a bit of a concern, I think.
Yeah, it's a fine line. It needs to be respectful. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Thanks.
Steve.
Steve Solitario, Queen's University, Canada. My question is two slightly different questions. One is, how do you avoid the tendency of management, upper management in the firm to just fire the bastards on the audit that you predict are not compliant, if you use it as a prediction model? That's one question. And the second question is wisdom of the crowd. Did you actually survey partners ahead of time to see which of the indicators they thought would be most likely to contribute to the engagements being poor quality? In other words, some measure of self-awareness ex ante before you gave them the model.
To start with the last, that was, I think, the foundation of this whole research. So we started off with the root cause analysis, which was fueled by them. Really, what do they think, what could lead to lower audit quality in that area that we had those issues with our external inspections. So I think that is something definitely included. And as part of those conversations, yeah, we can talk and also ask them what they think was happening on their engagements. And as Gosse explained, I think this model has proven to become some sort of a blind spot detection system for us. We've got all those engagements, and sometimes people forget about a few somehow. So that's at least my appreciation of it. And this system really helps us spot those. So should we fire those people? I don't think personally that's a little harsh to me. I'm not leadership of, I'm a director, but not in the board. So I hope not. But yeah, we can discuss with Anish maybe later what he thinks should be appropriate. But we'll leave it to him. Yeah.
The name is Bart van Heijden from BDO. But in the example that you gave, the 4 engagements, and the partner referred to the other 3 being at risk, and the one that you selected, it sounded like he was also, or she was performing risk analysis on its portfolio. And this also links to the prior question. Is that also considered in your, in your testing? So, does it mean that the partners themselves, that the data is contradicting the fact that they're looking at the right engagements and might be overcompensating the risky engagements?
So maybe as an example, something that we looked at in the data, and also we excluded, there's initial engagements, right? So if you go towards a new client, then all things are new. There's not a lot of prior knowledge of the client or of procedures in there that is in there. Or when a director is just newly promoted and they inherit a client. And what we noticed that within the firm, there's already a magnifying glass on this ×3, right? It's in the moment themselves. They get more resources, they get more hours to spend on this, but there's also more review on this. They might get assigned like an independent partner to review their work with them. There's an assumption that you will spend more hours on an initial client. So there are already focal points in the organization. And there's the client quality, which I talked about. So there's multiple reasons why partners themselves or decision makers higher up are focused on specific engagements and say there's some risk there, right? Which is useful, but that's not necessarily where we're coming with the data analytics. So I would say the added value that we have is mostly in this blind spot detection as well. Yeah, that's what I can say about it. Again, I'm a data scientist, so yeah.
Yeah, and I'm also not convinced if the person who we asked the question actually thought of this risk assessment before that interview. So that's also maybe honest answer that not sure if this whole moment of reflection of do I pay enough attention on each of my clients is something that every auditor asks himself every day. Could be worth the time. Yeah. So for that, I think that's a good suggestion to make. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Also to the audience for all the good questions. Big round of applause. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Very insightful. All right. with that, it's time for the task I apparently at some point gave myself to spend 15 minutes reflecting on this conference. So I will try to do that by summarizing my personal main takeaways from these 2 days of, I think, very insightful, inspiring presentations. So we've explored, when we started thinking about this conference and the conference theme, we realized, okay, innovation is still very much on the agenda. So let's make it on the organization of innovation. And I think we succeeded in having every presentation at least touch upon that some aspect of innovation, right? In many different ways. So we started off yesterday with Robert Neckel, our former academic board member, with a very nice reflection on the past 10 years of the FAR, which were really interesting for me to hear your thoughts on that, and I think we should keep talking and see, how we can design the next 10 years and improve things. And you also mentioned some really interesting recommendations for future research that the FAR, but of course also other researchers should think about. And then we moved on to Bart and Lopke, who I think are not here oh yeah, Lopke is still here. Who talked about the role of new talent in a way. Where you could say the future of innovation ultimately depends on how well we understand, but also how successful we are in attracting the right people to make it happen, to make that innovation happen. So I guess that would be the link. And we saw some evidence that there's quite some disconnect in what the young generation, the people that we want to attract to our profession, how they view the profession. And there's still some work there to make sure to bridge that gap. Then we had a really exciting panel led by Peter Eimers, which emphasized many of the capabilities, especially of AI and other technologies, but also definitely pointed at some challenges, like confidentiality issues were discussed, in the use of your personal phone, and what if you use ChatGPT to upload, confidential client data into the cloud? Well, that's pretty problematic, I would say. But we also talked a little bit about, various fears that could emerge from the rapid changes that we're seeing at the moment. Then we had Xiaoxing Li, who talked about AI skill development in a way, right? So if you want a workforce that's good at using AI, you also have to give them the chance to seek advice from those that know everything, the experts. But we saw that can sometimes backfire. So consulting or seeking advice, in some ways that might not always lead to the intended outcomes. So that's where the social aspects of this whole AI adoption and all these developments come in. Then we continued on this road of social interactions, where Diane Brees and Marie-Laure Vandenhouten added errors to the mix. So I guess we all know that the greatest innovations really came from mistakes, right? I'm sure you've all heard the example of penicillin, but also sticky notes. They were all inventions or innovations in a way that actually came out of a mistake. They were trying to develop something entirely different, a new sort of glue, which wasn't very good, but there we had sticky notes. Penicillin, same thing. That wasn't the original goal, but a great invention. What does it mean? It means that we have to deal with errors in an open, embracing way, because if you create too much of a blame culture, then people don't dare to make mistakes again, and then you can pretty much forget about innovation. So how do we build the right mindset? How do we build the right culture to learn from errors? Then this morning we had Mark Peacher talk to us about a lot of different things. So some of the notes that I took that I'm taking away from his talk are about the importance of theory. We sometimes tend to forget that, especially in this world of, big data and all the data that we can, that drives all the research that we can do. But at some point we have to go back and think about, well, what is the theory that makes us design a certain model or design a certain study and look at certain things rather than just make it data-driven. Another takeaway for me that we need to turn into something more hands-on practical, we already did a little bit during the conference, is the top 20 wish list. Of course, there's a standing invitation to all practitioners to provide us with their wish list, with their wishes, and we've already been in active conversation with the firms to find out more about what are, their burning needs and thoughts that researchers should engage with. But Mark also talked about decline cases that we're seeing at the moment. Think of the exam cheating case, of the confusion that we're seeing as a result of the ups and downs with sustainability assurance. What does assurance really mean these days? But also, and that's particularly relevant for the theme of the conference, all the threats coming out of AI, all the hype benefits there. And all of that leading to the big question, so what is the future of audit? How should the auditors play in on all these developments? Then we had Therese, again, talking more broadly about learning in the audit profession, so learning in a much broader sense than doing quizzes or, getting your continued education credits, but actually designing organizational circumstances that allow people to reflect on what they do and actually develop their expertise in a productive way. So the role of reflection, the role of culture, the role of psychological safety, all of which also play a role in creating a culture or a surrounding where innovation can grow. And then finishing with the research that you're currently working on, how does AI influence all this? How do we combine those prerequisites for learning with everything that's coming to us now from this AI development? And Saskia Nijs continued nicely on that and took us through zoomed out a little bit to workplace behavior, human technology interaction, and how we can make sure that that we use technology to support us in our primary tasks. So really think about what is it we're doing, what is our goal, rather than turning it around and being kind of the follower of all the great things that technology enables us to do, but losing sight of what's really important. So I thought that was very, very inspiring. She also talked about a lot of the threats, a lot of the hidden costs, the tokens. I thought that was interesting, but also the social consequences, health consequences, addiction even, which I think all of which we can relate to. And I think one of the final points she brought up was the hiring issue. And I think we're seeing that trend also in the audit profession, of not really needing those junior people anymore. But I mean, that's a real dilemma, because at some point these people also need to be trained to fill those higher up positions. And then in the final presentation, Twan and Gosse did a great job talking about a more real-world application, because it sometimes tends to be a little bit abstract. What are we actually talking about? Or we talk about, LLM, generative AI, but what you did was actually showing us a real-world application that you're experimenting with at your firm, predicting non-compliance or compliance. And I think, providing some hands-on advice to other firms also on what they could think of going forward. So with this, I want to also, of course, thank all of these speakers for sharing their research and their experiences, but also I want to thank the audience for being so actively participating in the discussions, raising questions, asking some great questions to the speakers, and that I think makes this conference really special, you know, reserving all that time for some interactions. And again, this year I think we made that work. I also want to give a big thank you to the FAR team who made this possible. So Bastian, Carlo, Klaas, Luc, Magdalena, Mustafa, thank you all for, you know, all your hard work in the last month, year even, in preparing this conference. I want to give a big applaud to you. Oh, I thought there was another slide. So before I close, without a slide, I would also like to ask you all to please fill out, I already said that this morning, I'm going to repeat it again, fill out the evaluation survey. We have a little incentive for you. If you fill it out, that will give you access to the slides of this conference. So hopefully that will, you know, incentivize some of you to fill it. It's a really quick survey. We're just curious, you know, and fill in the text boxes if you have anything that you thought, meh, that was good, but it could be better, and here's what you could do. We're very, very curious to hear about that. For the academics among you, by the way, and perhaps also some practitioners, I know that many of you will be traveling on to Maastricht for the ISAR conference that starts later today. I hope you have a great continuation of these discussions there. Of course, feel free to reach out to the locals in the room for travel advice. You know, the station is right here around the corner, so should be fine. I really hope to see many of you back in a year from now, when I hope that we will be here again and celebrate the next FAR conference. And with that, I'm going to the next slide. I'm inviting you for the lunch today. Hope to see all of you there. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you.